Hi everyone, TeaDrinker here, and today I'm reacting to Shogun Season 1, Episode 1. Alright, brand new TV show. Oh, a ship! I've just watched Black Sails, so this will be similar. I have no idea what this show is actually about, so this will be intriguing. I know that this is set in the 17th century, something to do with England and Japan. That's about it. Ooh, that's a grisly sight. Oh, we're getting... okay, what's happening? Ooh, okay. I have a feeling I'm gonna like this.
No pilot. Not me.
I'm curious to see how multilingual this show will be. Already I think the set design is done very, very well. God, that looks so foreboding. Oh, all that haze is fantastic. Whoa. Oh my god, that shot is amazing. I love the vignette around the lens as well. The photography is so interesting with the sunlight coming through. Ooh, that's a great pull out that we're getting right now. Anjin. Oh, that was great. I thought it was a still image. That was fantastic. So is this still set in the present day, I wonder? That is cool. That is really cool. Oh, I know that actor. So is he one of the 5 looking to take over the throne? Oh, all that music in the background is fantastic. Really, really strong. I wonder, will this be a very actiony show, or is it going to be more drama? Right, let's see what it is he's preparing for. Okay. Okay. And myself? Yeah. I don't think you're allowed to do that. Whoa! Tadayoshi, behave. We can be diplomatic about this. He's playing it very close to the chest. Okay, that's great characterization for our protagonist. So what's the truth behind this woman's whereabouts? I'm very curious to see. I wonder if we'll get a little bit more from Tadayoshi and see what's happening there. Oh, okay. That's great that we're seeing the conscientiousness of the protagonist. Man, the budget for this must have been insane. That shot right there was incredible.
Because the rutters are still locked in the Captain General's quarters.
Interesting.
By now, but here we are.
Alright, survivors.
12 shit-smelling
12 angry men.
Protestant scoundrels.
It's a great bit of world building, showing us the consequences of actions in this world. Poor baby. Oh, is it happening now? Interesting flashback. What happened there? Oh my god, that view is stunning. Absolutely stunning. Alright. What are the white dudes gonna do? Are they gonna be prepared for slaughter? Oh, no, 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 no! Ooh, interesting camera work. Oh, not nice. That's not nice either. And, well, he's gonna show you what's what now, isn't he? Whoa! I was not expecting that. I love the rain.
And I will not be spoken for by Catholics.
That's so interesting. The religious warfare between the two of them. I don't want to see what his special way is. Ah, back to our guy. Oh. Shooting with the wide lens is very, very interesting. See how bent all the imagery in the background is. Okay, the reluctance to follow a path. Interesting setup. Man, if this actually happened in real life, that's crazy. Holy Lord. Is she meant to be like a call girl for him? That shot is amazing. I'm really liking how much of this show apparently is going to be politically based. Well, there's going to be conflict there. Yeah, that's Richard from Lost. Knew it. I'm interested to see what their relationship is going to be. Oh.
Get them to row! Can you swim? Don't you? Never learn! Go to the ground quickly, right?
Whoa! Whoa! Good catch. Nice one. Oh my god. Yeah, there's no way Rodriguez is gonna die. He's too big of an actor, even for this show. Yo, that scene was nuts.
You can't turn down a challenge in front of your men, can you?
He's very simple, but you're the one going down on the rope. Oh! Ow, that looks sore. Oh! Come on, make it back up. Make it back up, guys.
What the hell is he doing?
Yeah, that was my question. Is he... Wait... Well, I'm glad he didn't do what he looked like he was gonna do. That is a phenomenal shot. Oh my god, it all lit up at night. That was phenomenal. That's loyalty. Oh, that's what our flashback was earlier. It's because more than one heart.
He's got to the Portuguese as soon as I arrive.
Whoa!
Or the one you never see.
I wasn't sure whether or not we were going to get this scene. Ooh, very, very interesting. Oh, okay. That was great. I wasn't sure what direction that was going to have, like how much of that was going to have the balance between characterization versus the action versus the politics, but a really, really compelling first episode. There was a lot set up there that I think it's going to make for a very interesting succeeding 9 episodes. So that's it for my reaction, and here is the review. Okay, so for our scene-by-scene analysis, right before we get into the very first scene, I have to mention how much I love the fact that the title card at the very beginning, giving us the exposition, says that all of them seek the title that would make their power absolute, and then we get Shogun, show up on screen. It was a little detail that from the rewatch I loved so much, just the way it was implemented, that I had to give it a quick shout out. Okay, so for our opening scene, for the exposition basically for the entire show, the setup for the entire show insofar as one of our protagonists goes, we get this great scene between Blackthorn and the captain. We learn that Blackthorn is English Protestant, that he is working for this Dutch company that are trying to circumnavigate their way at the end of South America to get away from any potential Spaniards who might catch them in the act. We find out that their ship has been completely devastated. That they started off with 500 men, and now they are down to only one ship. The captain says that it is barely even one vessel that they have left. We learn that Blackthorn is now essentially completely by himself, given that the captain has accepted defeat in the face of the inevitable, given his age and given the condition, and he chooses to end his own life. And what I only registered from rewatching the episode, because there is a lot that they do in this episode, is how Blackthorn refers to the captain's decision to take his own life in the face of the insurmountable odds, how he views that as the act of a coward. And given the significant role that suicide has in Japanese culture and for the feudal system throughout the rest of the episode, and of course what we're going to get down the line with Blackthorn seeing Yubei about to commit seppuku down in the water, seeing that arc for Blackthorn in this episode, in which at the very beginning, literally the first scene of the entire show, he regards suicide as being the act of a coward, to him then eventually view suicide as the act of a courageous warrior. That's a great arc that they gave a suitable setup for in the very beginning of the show. So I had to comment on that. I thought it was great exposition for the world of the show and for the external conflict of our protagonist, one of our protagonists in Blackthorn, as well as again the internal conflict of him growing to respect and admire an aspect of the Japanese culture. And so in the next scene, we had the character of Omi, who comes onto the Erasmus ships. He discovers Blackthorn there. We get the exposition that the rest of the crewmen have died or are on the very, very close brink of death via starvation. And it appears as though Blackthorn is the only survivor, at least for now. It's very interesting how one of the people working with Omi asks, "What are they?" Referring, of course, to what their nationality is, but as the episode proceeds, we see both groups of people referring to the other as barbarians. So a line such as "What are they?" is quite poignant for its ambiguity in that sense. And we get the great shot of Omi lifting up the cannonball, discovering how dangerous these men are, or at least how dangerous they were, which again gives great exposition for us that these aren't just ordinary merchants, as Blackthorn is going to try to convince them that that's exactly what they are. In general, you got a great indication as to what the production is going to be like for this show. You get the great sweeping shot of the samurai and all of his men running onto the beach to inspect the ship. And of course, preceding that, you got this wonderful shot of a Japanese fisherman carrying the cross when he first sees the ship emerge from the midst. Was just absolutely excellent. And again, really quickly, just to speak on the title cards of this episode, I want to talk about how when we get the title saying Chapter 1 Anjin, so I looked it up, and Anjin is, I just had to double check that Anjin is the Japanese for pilot, which is great because in television shows, usually the first episode a lot of the time is called pilot, and in this case, Anjin is literally used as a name for Blackthorn throughout the episode once he is discovered. So again, there's a great double meaning there that I really appreciated. So our introduction to Toranaga as a character, absolutely fantastic. I did not capture the significance of that opening scene until I went to do this rewatch. Toranaga talking about how the strength of his falcon, in that it conceals itself with the sun, and how it conserves its time, it conserves its energy until it's ready to strike in such a way that you don't even know it's there until it's too late, and how that mirrors at the very end with Rodriguez, what he's speaking about when he's telling Blackthorn that do you think the person who rules Osaka is an enemy that you can see, or one who conceals themselves in the shadows? Just again, the way that they bookend certain themes and certain symbols and ideas there is just really, really strong storytelling. Okay, so with Toranaga's arrival at Osaka Castle, we got a great deal of exposition for establishing the normal world of the story. So we learn that Toranaga is one of 5 lords, the other 4 of which seem to be very distrustful of him. They have seen the acts committed by him, his confirmation of 6 different marriages, as well as his 5 doubling in size. And now that we learn that he is in possession of the heir, the mother of the heir, to which they say, you have 7 days to bring her back, otherwise we will have you impeached. We learn that impeachment will result in death, most likely. And what's very interesting is, within that moment, we have a member of his clan, whose name I believe is Tadayoshi, who he interrupts the proceedings to say that he finds Ishido to be insulting, to insulting him. To which it's so interesting in that moment, because what he did when he sees Todayashi doing that, he doesn't try to instigate that matter further. He doesn't try to rile up Ishido, nor does he actually try to be combative against him at all. Instead, he says, how dare you insult Ishido? And then, of course, we have Todayashi saying that he will commit seppuku and he will end his own family's line as a result for this level of disrespect towards the Lord. So in this exposition is very interesting, because we understand that for the protagonist of the story, we understand that this is a person who is very strategic, very calm. He has not been flustered by this encounter at all. We get right before the council meeting begins, we see his right-hand man talk about how much he hates Osaka. And then, of course, in response, he says, well, let's just get this over with. We see that when he's being told forthright by Lord Ishido, that we have every right to be concerned, given the fact that you can rise to power within this sort of dynamic, and saying to him that whether you're low class, high class, or someone from your particular family lineage, we need to make sure that you are not a traitor. So I think it's great in that it's a great setup for the external conflict of the story, in that he is essentially at war, for lack of a better term, with the other 4 members of the Regent. But it also gives us great characterization that whoever this character is, we don't know to what extent he seeks power. We have an indication of it with the previous scene, with the analogy created there with the Falcon. But we understand that whatever game he's playing, whether he's on the side of good or bad, whether or not he does want the throne, doesn't want the throne, regardless, whatever decision it is that he's going to make, he is going to do it in such a way in which he is going to play the long game, and he's going to keep things very, very calm and keep his cards to his chest. Again, case in point, when Todayashi interrupts the proceedings, he makes it very clear to Ishido that he is not going to align himself with Tadayoshi's viewpoint there, with him saying, how dare you insult your lord. That whatever game it is that he is going to play, it is going to be one in which he is going to be very tentative about revealing his actual plans and intentions. So from an exposition point of view, as well as a characterization point of view, overall, I just thought it was an absolutely fantastic setup for the rest of the episode. So we got a short but really fantastic bit of dialogue between Toranaga and Hiromatsu. A couple of things were done there. For one thing, we get a bit of exposition that Tadayoshi is actually married to the granddaughter of Hiromatsu, and we understand that Toranaga is going to see to it that the girl lives as to the life of their child, and Tadayoshi is concerned. That's a different story, and we're going to see where that goes. We get further characterization for Toranaga in that we see a continuation of how he views this situation, and again, how he is willing to play the long game. Hiromatsu asks him, why do you have me looking into a barbarian ship that's washed ashore when you are days away from death? And Toranaga doesn't even give him any response to that, basically, which shows that whatever it is that he has planned, it is something that, again, he's keeping to himself, and it is something that he has the perceptive quality. He has the necessary level of perception to know whatever it is that he has planned, it is going to work, so we get that. We also get this great line of dialogue from him when he talks about the futility of death and how he's sick of all this death being around him, which again shows us that as for practical and pragmatic and stoic as he is not a character who is in any way bloodthirsty. He's not a character that wants to fight his way out of it. We get that bit of exposition where he literally says it's going to be 4 armies against 1, so I'm doomed if I try to do that. But in general, we get the sense that this is a man who has no interest in violent acts and violent deeds unless they are absolutely necessary. So again, for us as audience members trying to understand who is this character that we're going to be following, who our protagonist is going to be, that is very, very strong. Last thing I want to talk about between that interaction is, again, just it's a way of characterizing both men and showing the degree of friendship and loyalty that they have, and most importantly, the history that they have with one another, in which Toranaga says to Hiromatsu, do you often think that... He says something to the effect of, do you think it would have been better for you to have sided with the bureaucrats as opposed to myself? To which Hiromatsu says, I have thought about it. So you're showing that both characters are very introspective, and they are, again, just to use the word, they are very perceptive of their surroundings. In this sort of world, you have to be. But for both of them to have the level of trust and the level of emotional intellect to be able to have that type of conversation without there being a level of volatility or animosity behind it. Oh, yeah, it was a short scene, but I just thought it was really, really fantastic how much they were able to do in just a short amount of time. Okay, so our scene in which we see Blackthorn and the other 11 men held captive down in a pit. Right before that happens, we understand that Samurai Omi, at the very beginning of the show, it was him who discovered the men on the ship to begin with. We understand that he's the nephew of Lord Yabushige. We just get that little brief bit of exposition, which for the initial episode of the entire series is great because it's very badly needed exposition. Whatever we need, it really, really helps. But then we get the scene of Blackthorn down in the pit with his men. That gives us great exposition as to who this particular character is. We learn that not only is he a competent pilot, but he is one of the most competent pilots, in that it was due to him that the men were able to escape the Spanish fleets that were both to the north and south of them. He makes that big riling speech that, we may be 12 shit-smelling men, but we are able-bodied men, and that it is up to us to fight against the disgusting, motherless Portuguese fleet. It was a great scene in the sense that it gives an introduction to a particular theme, a particular idea that's repeated several times throughout the rest of the episode, the idea of savages, the idea of viewing other people as being an other, as being a monster, and be that due to their race, due to their nationality, or in this case a combination of both their nationality as well as their religious affiliation. We see, and have, as well as having the language barrier itself, be such a pivotal role for the entire episode. It's very interesting to see how the themes of othering persist throughout the rest of the episode. In general, I thought it was great to see even like little moments of very dry humor with the rest of the men. And again, upon my initial watch of the episode, I did get a bit confused as to why English was being spoken the entire way through. Of course, you do learn by the end of the episode that that is what the show was trying to do, just to be able to streamline the idea of this being a non-Japanese speaking person in a Japanese environment, that have the Portuguese replaced with English itself is just a storytelling device. It's a bit of a designing principle with regards to the show's exposition, which it does make it a lot more accessible as audience members. I think for me personally, I'm okay with watching anything with subtitles, but when you're making something for such a large audience, there is only so much it could take. Be that as it may, I thought it was a very strong scene that showed us it was a great setup for the amount of danger that Blackthorn is in, but again, it did create great characterization for us as the audience to learn in the very first episode of the series who one of the main protagonists exactly is. Okay, so our next scene, which is the introduction to the character of Mariko, our third protagonist for this show, at least insofar as the first episode goes anyway. Wow, just talk about powerful. To have the introduction to a character be one in which they're talking another character out of committing suicide, having learned that her only son must die and she is no longer allowed to bear any more children as a result of her husband's actions. For Mariko to come in and reassure her that you do have a purpose in life and you should not succumb to the pull of death, regardless of the mercy it would bring, that your purpose is to live because you have been ordered to live. In other words, that you are not the person who decides your purpose in life. Someone else has already done that for you. And for that to happen, as it's quickly referenced in that bit of dialogue between the two girls, and then later given to us via explicit exposition, via a flashback that Mariko is having, that someone very close to her passed away, and we subsequently learned that it was her father who passed away, that we don't know exactly what happened. Given the shot of him, there seemed to be some sort of carnage happening behind him, so it was clearly not a peaceful death by any stretch. For all of that to happen, and then the scene ends with her kissing the crucifix that she has, we see that she's devoutly Catholic, and that of course coming on the heels of the previous episode with Blackthorn announcing himself as a Protestant scoundrel. There's a lot more to come with Mariko, both for the rest of the episode and presumably with the subsequent episodes, which I have not seen yet at the time of me recording this. I haven't seen any more episodes in advance. I've just only seen this episode thus far. But what a terrific setup for her character. We see the strength of her, we see the civility she has, we see the level of respect that she commands with the other men, in which she informs them that it is only Fuji who is allowed to hold her son. Let her hands be the last to hold the body of her son. We see the respect that she commands, but we also see the respect that she has for tradition, for law and order. Again, via her telling Fuji that it is your purpose to allow this to happen, but also her relationship with God and her relationship with religion. So she seems to be a devoutly respectful person of some shape or form of hierarchy, be that feudal or spiritual. So, yeah, for sure, one of the more stronger character introductions that I've seen in a television show in quite some time. So, right before Blackthorn is brought up the ladder and he has that interaction with Omi, we get a bit of exposition in which we learn that explicitly Omi is Yabushike's nephew, in that his mother presumably tells Omi that we must take opportunity of this moment of Yabushige coming to our village. Given the fact that Yabushige has such a high prestige of power, as well as the fact that he hasn't even come to this village, not even when Omi's father passed away. So we can already maybe surmise that there might be a bit of a father-son relationship between the uncle and nephew there, maybe even if it's from a distance. We get the sequence of Yabushige making his way through the village, and we can tell just by his body language that this is not a character to be messed with at all. And insofar as not being messed with, we have Blackthorn trying to quell the situation in which there's the lack of communication. His men have the fish guts thrown on him, and he's brought up the ladder. And as I mentioned in the reaction, there's that great moment in which both parties refer to the other as being savages. And of course, when Blackthorn is brought up and we see him interacting with a Christian Japanese character via Portuguese, and the result of that, we have Blackthorn insulting Omi in a very vulgar way, and of course Omi responds in the way that he does. And there's that great level of juxtaposition, there's that great contrast of Omi referring to him as a savage and then, well, treating him the way he does. So for whatever position both men could be referred to as savages is very, very interesting. And this is building into the succeeding scene of Blackthorn meeting Yabushige himself, of course, but still in and of itself, that interaction between Omi and Blackthorn, it does a lot to illustrate the world that we're in and the overlying theme of what it is to be a savage and what it is to view the other person as being another to begin with. That I thought it was great world building, and it was great reinforcement of one of the central themes of the show itself, thus far anyway. And so the scene that comes then is our proper introduction to Yabushige. It's very interesting how we see the conflict between the priest and Blackthorn, given one is Catholic and the other is Protestant. They're really, really driving home the idea of conflict between the two ideologies in this story. But what's so interesting as well is you have the character of Yabushige, who he's not interested in the conflict at all. He even has the line where he directly says, "I'm sick of all this Christian nonsense." And of course, we also see, leading up to the interaction between him and Blackthorn, how a priest who will not stop praying for Blackthorn is just immediately beheaded by one of the samurai working for Yabushige. And of course, Blackthorn making the point very, very clear by ripping the crucifix off of the priest's neck and putting his foot right on it, and how that leads to Yabushige. I wouldn't go as far as to say that he respects Blackthorn necessarily, but he does get the indication that Blackthorn is not similar to the Portuguese Catholics that he has seen thus far, and as such he's kind of gained a level of trust in that sort of sense. But the scene ends with Yabushige saying that he wants one of the pirates to be killed in his special way, and we don't know what that is, but of course it creates a sense of foreboding. And in the previous scene, when we saw the characterization of Yabushige, his body language going through the village, we know that this is going to be a ruthless character. But for this supposedly ruthless character being set up as soon as possible, that he's a character who does not align himself with religion is very, very interesting. I don't think this show is necessarily going as far as to say that, well, if you're not believing in God, that makes you a monster or anything like that. But what is interesting in that is that he refers to Blackthorn as being a barbarian when he says, "I need a translator to communicate with this barbarian." And when we see what Yabushige is going to do in the upcoming scene, it's like, well, kind of takes one to know one. But nonetheless, the fact that you had a scene like this that gives us great exposition as to what is going to happen with Blackthorn, the state of affairs with regards to translation and religion within this world. But past those 2 points, just getting that bit of extra characterization of Yabushige, I thought was very, very interesting. And I mentioned this already in the reaction as well, but seeing all the rain come through, just the set design is really, really impressive thus far. I think I have no idea how difficult it must have been to shoot, whether that was using the natural climate or they had to, create artificial rain in order for that scene to work. But in any case, I thought it was really, really terrific. So our next scene of exposition between Toranaga and the Daimon gives us, it basically establishes what the inciting incident is going to be for the remaining 9 episodes. I mean, that's me guessing. I haven't seen any episode past this point, but you can pretty much presume, given the fact that the show is called Shogun, and here's this conversation talk about his reluctance to be the Shogun, exactly what the inciting incident is going to be. He is a man who is committed to peace. He does not want animosity. He has no time for warfare. And of course, the Daimon very much shares that sentiment. But we learn that Ishido very much has other plans, that how he was presumably able to get the other 3 regions to fall into place was to offer Toranaga's fief once he is murdered by the end of the week. We also get the ending of that scene, which is really, really nice, in which we have Yaichio, apologies if I got the name pronunciation wrong, but the heir to the throne. We understand that the day he was born, a tree was planted, and how the tree to this day is supported by Splint, and how Toranaga is very much that for the heir to the throne, that if he is dead, who is going to protect the child? Which is so interesting in that when you compare that as a parallel to what was happening with Tadayoshi earlier, in which it's not enough for him to be punished, his firstborn son has to be killed, just an infant must be murdered, as well as his wife now no longer being able to give them any more children because he has now sacrificed the end of his family line. That we see that the idea of, if the father is dead, we see what happens is in the sense of a familial link being broken, and how much is represented by the death of the father as well as the death of the son. So it was great in that, as audience members, we come to understand that Toranaga is going to be the reluctant hero of the story. Hero, at least in the sense of we're getting the story through his perspective, that he is going to have that rise to power despite his best wishes, given the fact that he wants to maintain law and order. That is the, I suppose you could call it the theme being maintained throughout the show, that there is the sense of adherence to tradition and adherence to hierarchy. And if making sure that the heir to the throne is maintained against the squabbling of the 4 other regions, which, of course, Toranaga wants no part in, that Toranaga is going to be the hero of that particular story. He is going to be the catalyst and indeed the carrier for that goal itself. That in this story, he is representing the fight for the good fight of maintaining, I suppose, what you confer as being the order of civilization itself. So our next 2 scenes together, counting them both as part of the one sequence in which we're getting exposition and also more so characterization for the character of Yabushige. We understand that this is a character who is very much fascinated with the final moment of death. We understand that through the dialogue through the expository dialogue given to us from the character of Kiku, who is the courtesan who has sex with the samurai in front of Yabushige. We understand that Yabushige wants to get as close as he can to the moment of death. And we understand that having one of the Englishmen boiled alive and hearing the screams for hours and hours isn't enough to satiate his understanding of what it must be like to come to the moment of death. But I think, to me, as an audience member, what that is trying to illustrate, it isn't trying to characterize him as a sociopath or a psychopath necessarily. It's definitely not characterizing him as a pacifist, that's for sure. But nonetheless, what, in my opinion, they're trying to do there is to show his relationship with death, given that this is something that he must encounter again and again, and is trying to understand it on this sort of beyond existential level in this really cerebral way. That, of course, is completely twisted. But I think that that's a great way of giving us characterization, not more than characterization of him. It's giving us world building, and it's kind of, in a way, making a statement as to how people who are in this position of power must interact. And then you have the scene in which, again, Kiku does have sex with the samurai right in front of him, which again shows that, from my point of view, this is a character who is not necessarily going to align himself with what is seen as traditional practice for adherence to a hierarchy. As for the character of Kiku, I'm unsure as to whether or not we're going to see more of her, or if she was just used as a means to an end of supporting the characterization and exposition of Yasushige. It would be interesting if we did see more of her, given that her actions in this episode were they were unorthodox, to say the least. And of course, she was, given the fact that she was giving us exposition about Yabushige, it would be interesting to see if her knowledge of understanding this world is going to be used as a means to an end of the audience understanding the world we're watching. So having a character, either having a character of her specifically, or just a character like her in a general sense, would be very interesting to see in the succeeding 9 episodes. It is also worth mentioning that the death of the Englishman at the hands of Yabushige also acts as a way of giving us characterization of Omi, who, given the fact that he's a lot younger and doesn't like watching people being boiled alive, who'd have thunk, how reluctant he is to he can barely even look at the man being killed in that scene. And then having the following morning Yabushige ask him, give me a poem as to the man's death. And the poem is actually, it's a pretty good poem just on the spot, the 3 lines saying how within the man's death we see the end of hell itself, that the pain, all of it is pain and all of it is articulate as well. It gives us, he acts as not necessarily a bit of a foil for Yabushige, but instead you could view him as maybe something of a reference point. You can see that Omi, for his youth and for his perhaps reluctance for the more extreme acts of violence, and of course the way in which he treats Blackthorn, that level of vulgarity. Nonetheless, he acts for the audience in that moment as a reference point to see just how far gone Yabushige has presumably gone in the way that he views other people, the way that he treats humanity itself. So that little interaction there, I thought, was great as a means to an end of characterizing both of them. So right before Hiromatsu arrives to Jiro, we have the scene between Yabushige and his nephew, where we get a bit more exposition that Omi's father only passed away a year ago, that Yabushige is very impressed with him and promises to increase his fee to 3,000 koku, whatever that means. We know it's good. We get the direct exposition, the setup for Yabushige's character, presumably for the remainder of the series, and that with him serving under Toranaga, and knowing that Toranaga is now trapped in Osaka, he is presuming that Toranaga's days are numbered, and he needs to make himself as strong as possible as a result of that. So it is in his interest to plunder the ship and to take whatever weapons is going to be on board, because if the remaining 4 regions are going to be, if there's going to be an upcoming war between Ishido and the Christian lords, that would necessitate Christian weapons. And well, if Yabushige is in charge of those weapons, then he will be a powerful ally. So it's great to see him trying to climb, not necessarily even climb the ladder, but going about things his own way to make sure that, because he's outside of that particular Game of Thrones, because he's not trying to necessarily be in a position of power so much as he's just trying to maintain his own sense of power, at least for the immediate future. It's very scheming. He definitely is set up as being like the scheming character of the series, I think. Maybe that'll change in episode 2, I don't know. But seeing him being that savvy in a way that's like very similar to Toranaga, but of course in a way that's far more devious, is very, very interesting. And then you have the character of Omi as well, who is so young and so impressionable that he's trying to learn to survive in this world to the best way he can. So whether or not he ends up going down a route similar to Yabushige, or he ends up being more similar to a Toranaga character. We'll have to wait and see. So as a way of furthering the plot along, we got a great scene between Yabushige as well as Hiromatsu, in which there's this great bit of dark comedy in which Yabushige is trying, very amicably, but also somewhat meekly, trying to assert the fact that, well, Izu is his fief, so at the end of the day, if he found the ship, then the ship is his. And Hiromatsu says, "Oh, so sorry, I thought you were loyal to our lord," and he reaches for the sword, and all the other men do as well. It was great as a means of reinforcing the level of power that Toranaga has within this world, and how Yabushige, he may be smart and devious, but he's not bulletproof by any stretch. And to see him have a similar approach and try to maintain face and maintain that level of amicability, and again just kind of keeping up appearances in the same way that Toranaga did when he was speaking to Ishido near the beginning of the episode. That was a great parallel. And of course the scene then ends, that part of the scene ends with Yabushige saying to Omi that clearly there's a spy in your village if Toranaga was able to find this out in advance. So it was great how you had the scene work as a continuation of Yabushige's storyline while introducing the thread of Toranaga's storyline, how the two of them meet, and then end up coming to a conclusion in which we find out that Yabushige is aware that there's a spy in the village. And of course, as the audience member, we learn that Toranaga has spies to begin with. Who that spy is, or if we're even going to find out who that spy is for the rest of the episode, we don't know. But given the fact that we did see in his scene with Hiromatsu towards the beginning of the episode, him reading the message off the bird, we understand that at the very least is his means of getting messages relayed to him. So yeah, short scene, but very, very impressive for how much they're able to get done in that short amount of time. So the next scene, we get the introduction to the character of Rodriguez. I recognize the actor as being Richard from Lost, which, there's a bit of a difference in characterization between those two, but it's great to see the actor pop his head up again. Nonetheless, we understand that Blackthorn is going to now be brought to Osaka. It was great actually to see from an outsider perspective through the character of Rodriguez. It's referred to how powerful Toranaga is as the lord of the Kanto region. Having an outsider character like Rodriguez, confirming that information, I think works really, really well from a storytelling point of view. It adds legitimacy to everything we've seen so far. It doesn't feel like just a bit of a shallow protagonist in that sense. Having a person outside the two parties kind of confirm the level of power that Toranaga has is very, very strong for me in that case. And as well as having a character who, he's quite vulgar. They made sure to make that very clear by having him say very vulgar things in such a short amount of time. It was a little much. It was maybe just a bit heavy-handed. I'd say they could have gotten rid of maybe one of those lines at least, and the same thing would have been achieved. But nonetheless, having a little bit of comedic relief, no matter kind of how small and dry it is, was still quite welcome to see. So right before the sequence of the storm, we get a great further banter between the two men, between Blackthorn and Rodriguez, in which we get actually a great bit of characterization for Rodriguez in that he's explaining the concept of karma to Blackthorn. We understand that this is a person who believes in fate, he believes in destiny, and him having a spot in the world. So that's a great parallel between the likes of Mariko, in which she herself is aligned quite strongly spiritually, although two of them are believing in a way quite different things. But of course there's a similarity between, of course, the divine judgment of God as well as the divine judgment of karma itself. But of course, with Rodriguez being the character he is, we can understand why his belief in karma can be a bit more, for lack of a better phrase, kind of more hippie in that kind of a sense. And seeing the way in which Blackthorn is very coyly saying, no, we were just a merchant ship. We ended up here by accident. The 20 guns on our ship, that was just to defend ourselves. It's a great bit of characterization for Blackthorn, who up until now has had the very, very dramatic scenes with some kind of dry vulgarity thrown into the mix. So seeing the scene in which there's an actual sense of camaraderie between him and another character at this point of the show was very nice to see. Rewatching the scene of the ship going into the storm, there's not a huge amount to say there with regards to talking about exposition or characterization necessarily. I just got to commend the production. It just seemed so intense. Like rewatching it with the sound design going the whole way through as well. I think it was very interesting as well how at this particular point they weren't using a lot of... I don't think they use any music in that sequence at all, just letting the natural sounds of the water and the wind and the creaking of the ship do all the heavy lifting there. I thought was very, very strong. And seeing Blackthorn just at the last moment throw an oar out to Rodriguez, say that 5 times fast, doing that as a means to an end of saving a man's life just with that split second decision making, knowing that Blackthorn as a true pilot, his main concern is making sure his crew live. And of course, we saw him save one of the men from going overboard just really quickly beforehand as well. That was great. It was a great way of showing the type of person that Blackthorn is in moments of peril. So then we get the sequence in which Blackthorn and Yabushige team up in order to find and subsequently rescue Rodriguez. It was a scene that I referred to earlier when in noting how in the very first scene of the entire show, we have Blackthorn tell his captain that he believes that suicide is the act of a coward. And here we have it now come full circle to the end of that particular arc in which Blackthorn sees Yabushige's bravery in just about to commit seppuku. Is it referred to as seppuku or harakiri? Does it have a particular name when it's not out of disgrace, but rather a person taking their life into their own hands? I'm not sure what the exact Japanese terminology would be, but be that as it may, the point is that Blackthorn is very much moved by that, and when Yabushige makes his way back to safety, Blackthorn goes as far as to bow towards him, to which Yabushige chuckles at. In general, I think the sequence was very, very well directed. As you probably see from my reaction, I was really taken aback at the moment, at the really more intense moments, particularly when Yabushige falls, and having the music work in the background as we didn't have it in the previous scene going into the store, but we had it here, I thought was very, very effective. And it's great to see Rodriguez saved, of course, it goes without saying. But in general, it was something that I didn't catch until doing the rewatch of the episode, and I gotta say, it's very, very strong writing. This early on into the show, giving us a bit of an arc for the character of Blackthorn. And again, seeing Yabushige, who, in a way, I don't know if I'd go as far as to call it an arc necessarily, but given that throughout the episode we've seen the character's his very, very morbid fascination with death, and here he is just on the brink of dying, moments away from drowning, and ready to take his own life, and just looking so stoic, looking so completely committed to doing that act in this moment. It's very, very strong characterization for both men, and I think for me, as a viewer, for sure to a particular degree on the first go around during my reaction, but definitely during the rewatch, this is a scene that made me think, you know what, I'm very likely to enjoy the rest of this series. So right before I talk about the scene with Toranaga and Mariko, I just have to shout out this shot right here. Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. I just have to call attention to that. So as for the scene itself between Toranaga and Mariko, we got the continuation of the exposition for Mariko's character, and we find out what her backstory was, which is very interesting, and again reinforces everything that's been said before about her alignment with law and order, her alignment with tradition, her alignment with a purpose. We understand that her trauma doesn't come merely from her father dying, but for her as a samurai to not be allowed to die alongside her father, and for her to then say to Toranaga that she is committed to die alongside Toranaga himself, wherever the road may lead. We understand that she is as serious as can be about that she truly is fully committed. So to then have the scene move on further and get the exposition that Toranaga is looking for her to be the mediator between himself and Blackthorn is going to be great setup for the succeeding episodes following this one. And in general, just getting an interaction between those two characters who, within this world, for all intents and purposes, should be separate from one another, but of course they aren't. They are quite close. I thought was very, very strong. And so we get quite a lot in the final sequence of the episode. At the beginning of it, we get the interaction between Rodriguez and Blackthorn, in which Rodriguez makes it very clear that he knows exactly what Blackthorn has been up to. They were able to joke about it, but Rodriguez now makes it very clear in this scene, now that he holds the rudder that Blackthorn was sworn to retrieve back for his men back when he had crewmen. Rodriguez makes it very clear that he is going to hand it over to the Portuguese as soon as he can. Blackthorn initially puts up a fight, realizes that it's absolutely pointless. He has a cup in his hand, Rodriguez has a gun. I thought that was a very good way of using the visuals to make that power dynamic very, very clear. And Rodriguez goes on to talk about how, again, he brings up the idea of fate and how you just have to accept things the way they are. There's nothing you can do. And when Blackthorn refers to this as being a wretched land that he is on, Rodriguez says to him, well, go upstairs, have a look out at that and see if you think that what we have, what we call civilization, compares to this. So having Rodriguez view himself as being beneath the, let's say, power of Japan, you having the environment of Japan and Osaka specifically, having the environment as, in a way, of course, being a plot device, but some could even argue as being a character of the show, with how much prominence it has of being such a central designing principle of the writing, having it be that important of a factor for the world, because of course it is the world, I think it brings together the themes of otherness that I mentioned before, of otherness as well as tradition, as well as purpose, that all these things exist within a world that isn't an abstract, but instead is very tangible. It is a geography, it is a location, it is Japan, it is Osaka. So having that alongside a great monologue which works as we get the overlays of Tadayoshi having to have his son killed, as well as Blackthorn being brought in front of Mariko, as well as being brought in front of Toranaga, off of the heels of the interaction he had with Mariko. So you get our three protagonists all here in the same room, and having that as the setup for the succeeding 9 episodes, everything about the final 5 minutes of the episode I thought was very strong. And in general, I thought it was a very strong episode. I really, really liked it. I had a feeling I was I was familiar with just the very basic premise that it was going to be set in the 1600s. It was going to involve Japan and the English, and involves ships in some way. And given that the last show that I completed was Black Sails, which I absolutely adored, I was very excited to watch anything to do with ships again. So that's pretty much it for the review. I want to thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I'm very, very excited to see where the story is going to end up. I don't know if there's going to be a second season of this. I understand it's based off of a book. When I looked it up online just to remind myself of one of 2 names of the characters, I see one of the composers as well as Atticus Ross. That's great. It was described as being a drama miniseries, so maybe this is just all one self-contained story. Maybe there isn't going to be a season 2, and it's very much like it's a historical drama miniseries, somewhat akin to Band of Brothers. And of course, Band of Brothers was something way more aligned with historical accuracy, but nonetheless, this is just its own self-contained story, and there'd be no purpose behind a season 2 if they're illustrating everything that needs to be told. But be that as it may, I would be excited to see the succeeding 9 episodes, even if there isn't going to be anything past that point. So once again, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. And if you have made it to the end of the video, I would like to leave you with a poem. Catherine Tynan, The Wind That Shakes the Barley. There's music in my heart all day. I hear it late and early. It comes from fields are far away, the wind that shakes the barley. Above the uplands drenched with dew, the sky hangs soft and pearly. An emerald world is listening to the wind that shakes the barley. Above the bluest mountain crest, the lark is singing rarely. It rocks the singer into rest, the wind that shakes the barley. Oh, still through summers and through springs, it calls me late and early. Come home, come home, come home, it sings, the wind that shakes the barley. Thanks for watching.